I wasn't trying to be dramatic that night. Honestly, I just wanted to do something nice. Ethan had been so distant lately. Distracted, short-tempered, barely present. I kept telling myself it was just stress, that work had him pulled in every direction. So, I thought, why not surprise him with his favorite dinner? Braised lamb, rosemary potatoes. That wine he always pretended not to love. Just something that might soften the silence growing between us. I grabbed his car keys without thinking twice. My own car was low on gas, and his was right there. The light outside was warm and golden, that peaceful time of day when the world feels half asleep. I slipped into the driver's seat, humming to myself, and leaned over to the glove compartment. I just needed napkins, that's it. But when I opened it, something caught my eye. And everything shifted in an instant. It was a lipstick. Deep red, sleek tube. Not mine. I don't wear red, haven't since college. My heart didn't race, my face didn't flush. No, it was colder than that, like my blood forgot how to move. I turned it over in my hand, almost curious. It looked expensive. Not the drugstore kind. This could mean nothing, I told myself. It could be anything. But something in me had already started unraveling, and I knew. I had to look closer. I sat there for a moment, just staring at it. The tube felt heavier than it should have, like it was carrying some kind of truth I wasn't ready to hold. I turned it slowly, examining the bottom for a clue. The shade was called Scarlet Spell. Cute. Bold. Definitely not me. I don't flirt with colors like that. And Ethan? He would have never bought something like this for me. He's never even noticed when I change my hair. Still, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just placed it gently on the passenger seat, like it might explode if I moved too fast. My hands shook a little as I started the engine. The drive to the store felt longer than usual. Every red light a chance to second-guess what I'd found. It doesn't mean anything yet, I kept repeating. But deep down, something ancient in me had already stirred awake. A kind of knowing only women carry in their bones. By the time I reached the parking lot, I had made a quiet decision. I wasn't going to accuse him. Not yet. If there was something to uncover, I'd find it, without him knowing I was looking. I've seen what happens when women confront too soon. They get gaslit, dismissed, made to feel crazy. No, I was going to stay calm, controlled, smiling even. And if he was lying to me, then he had no idea who he was dealing with. I walked through those store aisles like nothing was wrong. Tomatoes, garlic, rosemary, each item dropped into the basket like clockwork. But inside, my mind was weaving a web, replaying conversations, scanning for inconsistencies. I thought back to last Tuesday when he said he was working late, and how he came home smelling different. Not bad, just not like me. A scent I couldn't name, but now I wondered if it had a matching lipstick. At checkout, I smiled at the cashier, waved goodbye. On the surface, I was the same woman I'd always been, warm, patient, devoted. But something had shifted, quietly but permanently. That lipstick had cracked open a door I didn't even know existed. And whatever was behind it, I was ready to face it, on my terms. By the time I got home, Ethan was already back, in the shower, humming like nothing in the world could touch him. I placed the groceries on the counter, slow and deliberate, and pulled the lipstick from my purse. I turned it in my hand one more time, then tucked it in the drawer beneath the sink. It wasn't time to ask questions yet. No, first I needed answers. And I had a feeling they were closer than he thought. That night, while he showered, I moved like a ghost through the house. Quiet, unbothered, focused. I opened the bathroom drawer where I'd hidden it. The lipstick. I studied it under the warm kitchen light this time, like a detective studying a clue. The brand was luxury, high-end, the kind of thing someone wears when she wants to be noticed. And then I saw it. Tiny, elegant letters engraved on the gold rim. AM. My pulse quickened, but I stayed calm. Initials, I thought. Not mine, not anyone I knew. But maybe his, maybe hers. I turned it over again and again, like it might whisper something if I stared long enough. I thought about asking him right then, catching him off guard. But that's not how this would go. I needed more than a hunch. I needed proof. The kind you can't wiggle out of with lies or charm. The next morning, I kissed him on the cheek and wished him a good day. I packed his lunch, just like always. He smiled, said thank you, called me sweetheart, the usual script. But I noticed the new cologne. Not the one I gave him last Christmas. This one was sharper, muskier, seductive almost. I watched him leave like I always did, waving from the porch. But this time, I wasn't sending him off with love. I was sending him off with a question. Over the next few days, I became someone else entirely. Still me, but sharper, more alert. Like a hawk watching the ground for movement. I started paying attention to everything. The way he locked his phone screen when I walked by. How he flinched slightly when I mentioned plans for the weekend. And then came the shirt. A white button-down I was folding in the laundry room. Right on the collar, barely there. A soft smear of red. I held it close to the lipstick I'd hidden. Same tone, same shimmer. My stomach tightened, but I didn't cry. No tears, just facts. I bagged the shirt and put it away in the back of the closet. If he wanted to play games, I'd play better. No outbursts, no yelling. That's what they expect. Emotional chaos. But I was past that. I wanted him to feel safe, unbothered, maybe even smug. That's when they slip. I started checking his calendar, his call logs, even his gas receipts. He wasn't covering his tracks well. Thursday night meetings that ended too late for a quick dinner, but not late enough for exhaustion. Saturday errands that took 3 hours and came back with nothing but a bottle of wine and an empty smile. And through it all, I smiled too. Sweet, steady. The picture of a loving wife. But inside, I was already cooking something far more satisfying than dinner. I started testing little things. Nothing major, just nudges. I asked if he wanted to do a date night, watched him hesitate. I brought up an old friend of mine just to see if he'd mention this AM woman by accident. But he didn't flinch. He was too polished now, too rehearsed. The charm had returned. The smiles, the casual hand on my back as he passed by in the kitchen. Almost like he was trying to remind me how lucky I was. But I wasn't fooled. I was fascinated. The better he played the doting husband, the more I knew something was rotting underneath. And that rot had a name. I could feel it. He was hiding someone, and she didn't even know I existed yet. That's when it hit me. If he was lying to both of us, maybe it was time we met. But not in the way he'd expect. I stood in front of the mirror that evening, holding the lipstick like a key. I wasn't going to scream into the void or beg for truth. No, I was going to rewrite the script entirely. If Ethan wanted a performance, I'd give him one he'd never forget. And the first step? Figuring out exactly who AM really was. I didn't pull away. I leaned in. Hard. I became the kind of wife men brag about in office break rooms. Packed lunches with handwritten notes. Morning texts that said, "Thinking of you," with a heart emoji. I even complimented the shirts that still smelled like lies. And he lapped it up. Every smile I gave him felt like a little test. And he kept passing, convinced I was blind. He started relaxing again, like the air around him had cleared. The late nights returned, but so did the casual kisses. He laughed more, touched me more, probably thinking whatever distance had been between us had simply vanished. And maybe that's what made it all so delicious, knowing he thought he'd gotten away with it. That I was the same woman waiting by the door with a glass of wine and no questions. But behind the scenes, I was working, quietly, carefully. I booked a salon appointment under the name AM, just to see if anyone would blink. I created a fake profile with a different name, different face. Nothing flashy, just someone his type might follow. I started watching the women he liked, followed, interacted with. One stood out, beautiful, flirty, and very proud of her selfies, especially the ones taken in a car that looked a little too familiar. Her name was Ariana Morris, mid-30s, gorgeous but not in a polished way, more like she'd roll her eyes at compliments and still know exactly the effect she had. Her profile was public, which made things easier. I scrolled through her feed like I was flipping pages of a book I hadn't meant to open, but couldn't put down. And there it was, a photo of her in a passenger seat. Burgundy leather, same dash, same mirror charm Ethan bought in college. I zoomed in, no denying it. That was our car? My car, technically, the one I drove when he borrowed it for errands. She captioned it with something stupid like, "When Fridays feel like magic." I stared at the image for a long time, wondering if she knew. If she even cared, but judging by her smile, she didn't know I existed. Or worse, she knew and didn't see me as a threat. I checked her posts for patterns, time of day, locations, which ones he liked. I even traced back old check-ins to see if they overlapped with his supposed late meetings. They did. The timeline lined up like a puzzle he never thought I'd solve. And with every new detail I uncovered, the anger inside me simmered. Not explosive, not wild, just focused, measured. The kind of anger that plans things with linen napkins and candlelight. I started rehearsing the way I'd look at him, the way my hand would rest lightly on his, just like always. The small pauses in my sentences, carefully timed to seem adoring, not suspicious. I gave him no reason to question me, not even for a second. That was the key, to stay soft on the outside, while sharpening every instinct I had on the inside. He couldn't know I'd already found her. He couldn't suspect I'd been planning a meeting. I even played into his ego, told him he seemed lighter lately, more relaxed. He grinned, said work had been finally manageable again. I smiled right back, holding his gaze like I still believed every word he said. But inside I was already building the evening, the menu, the wine, the dress I'd wear. And I knew exactly how it would unfold. He'd come home to the scent of rosemary and garlic, expecting affection. He'd get something else entirely. I waited until everything was perfectly in place. The fake message sent from his phone to Ariana. The time, the date, the address, no detail left to chance. Because if he was going to lie to both of us, then the least I could do was set the table for the truth. And soon, very soon, they'd both be seated. I told him he deserved a special night. Just the two of us. "You've been working so hard," I said with a smile. "Let me spoil you a little." He looked surprised, flattered even. The kind of reaction that tells you everything about where their guilt sits. I lit the candles, set the table with the good dishes we only use for anniversaries, cooked every bite from scratch. His favorite meal, down to the garlic butter on the bread. He walked through the door like a man returning to safety. I greeted him with a kiss on the cheek, a glass of wine, and the softest version of my voice. "Dinner's almost ready," I said. He relaxed into the evening like it was exactly what he needed, and in a way, I guess it was, just not the way he thought. He asked what the occasion was. I shrugged. Love doesn't need a reason, right? He bought every second of it. Sat down, commented on the music. "You really went all out," he said, slicing into his food with a grin. I laughed lightly. "Of course, tonight's important." And just as he reached for his drink, right on cue, the doorbell rang. He froze, fork in midair. "Are you expecting someone?" he asked. "No," I said, with a smile so gentle it could cut glass. "But you are." He stood slowly, almost like his body was moving before his brain could catch up. I watched his back as he walked to the door, shoulders tightening, hesitation in every step. He opened it, and there she was, Ariana, in a fitted black dress, holding her purse with a confused little smile. "Hey," she said softly. "You told me to come." "You said you wanted me to meet someone." Her voice trailed off the second she saw me. I stayed seated, calm, composed, my wine glass in hand, the candlelight catching the rim just right. Ariana blinked, glanced back at Ethan, then back at me. Her eyes widened as the puzzle pieces snapped into place. "You must be Victoria," she said, voice tightening. I nodded. "And you must be AM." I motioned to the empty chair across from me. "I saved you a seat. I figured since you two share a car, you might as well share a meal." Ethan's face was a masterpiece of panic. He looked from me to her and back again, his mouth opening, then closing, like a fish pulled from water. This isn't what it looks like," he finally stammered. I tilted my head. "Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like." My tone was soft, too soft, that kind of quiet that unsettles a man more than screaming ever could. I gestured to the wine. "Join us, Ethan. I wouldn't want you to miss your big moment." Ariana didn't sit. She stood frozen by the door, eyes darting between us, breathing shallow. I could see it on her face. That slow, creeping horror of realizing she hadn't been special. Just a piece in a story she didn't know had a leading lady. She clutched her purse a little tighter. "You never told me you were married," she whispered. Her voice cracked, but I didn't look at her. My eyes were locked on Ethan. He looked like he might throw up. "Victoria, he began, but I raised a hand. "Save it. You've said enough. To both of us." He tried to reach for me, some pathetic gesture of damage control. I leaned back in my chair. "I just wanted to see her face," I said, still calm. "To know who you thought was worth risking everything for." I turned to Ariana then, finally. "Now you know too. Hope he was worth it." Without another word, she turned and walked out, her heels clicking against the tile like punctuation marks. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, alive. Ethan stood there, lips parted, but I was already rising from my chair. I reached into the drawer by the table, pulled out a folder, and slid it toward him. "Dessert's off the menu tonight," I said, "but I do have something sweet for you." He didn't touch the folder, just stared at it like it might catch fire. Inside were the divorce papers, already signed on my end. Clean, unapologetic. I didn't need a scene or an explanation, just closure. "You'll need to vacate by the end of the week," I said calmly as I started collecting the plates. "The lease is in my name. Utilities too. I've already spoken to the landlord." He looked stunned, like he'd just realized the game was over and he wasn't holding any cards. He opened his mouth, probably to beg or lie or blame stress, they always do, but I didn't give him the space. "Don't," I said, not harshly, just final. "You made choices, and now you get to live with them." He tried to follow me into the kitchen, but I stopped him with just a glance. That was all it took now. One look. Because the power had shifted, and we both knew it. Later that night, I heard him crying in the guest room. I didn't flinch. Not out of cruelty, just peace. The kind of peace that comes when a storm finally stops pretending it's just rain. I sipped my tea, turned the page of my book, and let the silence wash over me like a baptism. I was no longer the woman waiting for his attention. I was the woman who'd taken her life back and set it gently on fire to keep herself warm. The next morning, I changed the locks, not out of spite, out of necessity. I needed to reclaim every inch of space he'd polluted with lies. I boxed up his things with the same care I once folded his shirts. Labels, neat piles, taped shut. I didn't smash anything, didn't burn a single photo. I wasn't erasing the past. I was simply refusing to let it weigh me down. And every box by the door felt like a small exhale I'd been holding for years. I blocked his number after he sent the 6th message in 2 hours. Long apologies, old photos, half-written memories meant to make me soften. But I didn't soften. I'd done enough soft. I left the messages unread, deleted his contact, and turned my phone face down. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was clean, untouched. It felt like the first white page of a brand new book, and for once I didn't need anyone else to help me write it. In the days that followed, I didn't cry, I didn't drink, I didn't spiral. I made my coffee each morning, walked barefoot through the living room, opened the windows wide. The air felt lighter. The mirrors looked kinder. There was no one left to perform for, no one to second guess. I had given him every chance to be honest, and he chose secrets. So, I chose myself. A few weeks later, I took the car for a long drive, the same one he used to borrow when he said he needed space. Only this time, the seats were clean. The glove compartment was organized, and inside, I placed a single lipstick. Mine. A soft mauve with my initials carved into the gold cap. Not a message to him, just a reminder to myself that I could take back what was mine, piece by piece, that I was no longer in the passenger seat of my own life. I pulled over at our favorite overlook, or at least it used to be. Watched the sky stretch wide and unapologetic, just like I wanted to be. I took a breath, deep and full, without the weight of wondering who he was texting or what excuse I'd be fed next. There was nothing left to uncover. No more lies hiding in plain sight. Only the quiet hum of freedom and the strange beauty of a chapter finally closed. As I turned the key in the ignition, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes looked steady. My mouth? Almost smiling. I leaned back in the seat and whispered, "If you leave proof of your betrayal, I'll leave a mark you'll never forget." Then I drove off, not running, not escaping, just moving forward with both hands on the wheel.
My name is Diana Peterson, and I'm 28 years old. If you asked me back then, I would have told you I had everything I wanted, a decent career, a cozy apartment, and a man I love more than life itself. Oliver and I had been together for 5 years. 5 years of tiny milestones that felt monumental when you shared them with someone you thought was forever. We signed the lease on our first place together. Nothing glamorous, just a worn little apartment with squeaky floorboards and a kitchen that always smelled faintly of roasted chicken and coffee. We filled it with second-hand furniture, hand-me-down dishes, and a bookshelf sagging under dog-eared novels. It wasn't much, but it was ours. I worked as a systems analyst, steady income, not flashy, but I was proud of the security I had built. My student loans were finally gone. Every paycheck gave me the quiet reassurance that I could take care of myself and of us. Stability. That was my word, the foundation of how I lived. Oliver, though. Oliver lived in momentum. He was an event planner, thriving on the rush of galas, fundraisers, and high-profile clients. His life was champagne bubbles and glittering rooms, while mine was spreadsheets and carefully balanced budgets. And I didn't mind. I believed balance was what made us strong. I was his grounding force. He was my spark. I was his biggest fan. I bought him new suits when he landed a big client, stayed up late, helping him polish proposals, and listened to him gush about his future until my eyes ached with exhaustion. I thought I was his partner in every sense of the word. But somewhere along the way, cracks began to spread across the foundation I thought was so unshakable. It started with the little things. The way Oliver's voice would take on a sharp edge when he glanced at my laptop. "Your job is so predictable, Diana. Don't you ever want more?" At first, I laughed it off, telling myself it was just his ambition talking, but his words stuck like splinters beneath the skin. He compared me to other men friends of his colleagues who were taking risks, starting their own ventures, chasing dreams with reckless abandon. I didn't need to be flashy. I didn't want that life. But every time he spoke with that mixture of boredom and disdain, I felt smaller. And then came Eva. She was one of his clients, a so-called venture capitalist, with a sports car, a diamond smile, and enough confidence to fill an entire ballroom. Oliver talked about her constantly. Eva really understands my vision, Diana. She sees the ambition in me. The first time it stung. By the fifth time, it felt like a deliberate wound. I told myself it was harmless, that Oliver's admiration was professional, maybe aspirational, but deep inside, a knot began to form. I ignored it because that's what you do when you've built 5 years on the belief that love is enough. You cling tighter. You pray the foundation will hold. But somewhere in the back of my mind, the whisper began. What if I'm not enough? I didn't know it then, but I was already standing on the edge of the cliff, blind to how close I was to falling. The end came on a Tuesday evening. Funny, isn't it? You never think the day your life shatters will be something as ordinary as a Tuesday. I was on the couch, laptop open, reviewing code from work. The apartment was quiet, only the low hum of the fridge filling the silence. Then the door opened, and Oliver walked in wearing a sleek black suit I'd never seen before. He looked sharp, expensive, different. My heart skipped a beat, though not in the way it used to. I need to talk to you, he said. His voice was calm, almost rehearsed. I closed my laptop, smiling, waiting for him to sit down. But he didn't sit close. He lowered himself onto the far end of the couch, leaving a gulf of empty space between us. I'm going out with Eva tonight, he continued. My stomach tightened, a cold wave crashing over me. Isn't she your client? I asked, forcing steadiness into my voice. He looked at me, eyes clear, almost pitying. She's more than that, Diana. Much more. I waited for him to laugh, to tell me this was a bad joke, but no laughter came. I'm leaving you. His words were a blade cutting clean through the air between us. Eva and we're compatible. She's not afraid to take risks. She gets me. I need that in my life. I felt my heartbeat in my throat pounding like it wanted to escape. 5 years, Oliver. 5 years, and you throw it away like this. His lips curved into something between a smile and a sneer. Don't be naive. We all have a plan A and a plan B. You. He gestured at me with a dismissive wave. You were my plan B. The safe option. Predictable. Always there. But Eva. She's plan A. She's the future. The words rang in my ears like a cruel joke. Plan B. That's what I had been reduced to. Not a partner, not someone worth choosing, just insurance. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg. To remind him of the nights I stayed awake by his side, the sacrifices I made, the love I poured into every corner of our life. But something colder gripped me. Because in that moment, staring at his smug, careless face, I realized there was nothing left to save. The Oliver I loved, the man I thought he was, had never truly existed. He was a mirage, and I had been the backdrop for his performance. I stood slowly as if underwater. My keys, my wallet. That's all I took. Diana, he called as I walked to the door, his voice suddenly unsure. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The apartment, the memories, the 5 years, I left it all behind in the silence of that Tuesday night. And with every step I took away from him, the word Plan B echoed in my chest like a curse and a warning. That night, I ended up on my friend Clara's couch. She didn't ask questions, not at first. She just handed me a blanket, switched off the lamp, and let me sink into the hollow quiet. The silence of her spare room was deafening, filled only with the echo of Oliver's words, Plan B. I couldn't cry. Not yet. The shock was too heavy, pressing against my chest like lead. The next morning, when Oliver was at work, I went back to the apartment. I moved like a stranger through rooms that had once been a sanctuary. I packed a single duffel bag, a few clothes, my toothbrush, nothing more. The bookshelf, the framed photos, the little trinkets we collected on trips, I left it all. They weren't mine anymore. They were relics of a lie. On the counter, I left a note. Just 4 words, I wish you the best. It wasn't kindness. It was closure, a wire cut clean. I dropped my key beside the note and walked away. The months that followed were a blur, but not in the way heartbreak usually is. I didn't drown myself in wine or rebound dates. No. My grief came quietly like a shadow following me everywhere. At first, the apartment I rented felt like a cell. Bare walls, empty shelves, a hollow fridge that hummed too loud at night. But slowly something shifted. I started cooking for myself again. Not elaborate meals meant to impress Oliver, but simple, nourishing dishes. A bowl of soup, fresh bread, food that tasted like me. On weekends, I laced up my old hiking boots and hit the trails. The first time my lungs burned, my legs ached, but with every step into the forest, I felt the noise inside me quiet. I called my friends again, the ones I had neglected because I was too busy orbiting Oliver's universe. Clara laughed when I asked if she still remembered how we used to binge cheesy reality shows. I was waiting for you to come back, she said softly. Piece by piece, I stitched myself together. Work became more than just a job. For years, I had been the stable one in Oliver's eyes, the predictable plan B. But when my company landed a major account, I'd been chasing something inside me lit up. I worked nights fueled by determination, and when we closed the deal, I was promoted. With the raise, I moved out of the shoebox rental and into a real apartment. It wasn't flashy, a small one-bedroom with a narrow balcony overlooking a park. But it was mine. Every object inside, every plant, every photo, every chair was chosen for me, not for someone else. Sometimes I'd stand on the balcony with a cup of coffee and let the breeze wash over me. The ache was still there, yes, a dull throb in the chest where love used to live, but it was no longer fire. It was just scar tissue. I wasn't just surviving, I was rebuilding. And the strangest part, the more I built for myself, the more I realized I had never truly lived before. It had been nearly 2 years since I walked out of that apartment. By then, Samuel and I were engaged. My life felt solid, whole, and peaceful in a way I never thought possible. Then one evening, over drinks, with an old friend, I heard his name again. "Have you heard about Oliver?" Clara asked, her voice carrying that mix of gossip and pity. I froze. I hadn't spoken his name out loud in so long that it felt foreign, like dusting off a book you once loved, but could no longer read. "What about him?" I asked, careful to keep my tone light. Clara leaned closer. Eva left him. Turns out she wasn't some big-shot investor. She was a scammer. Used his contacts, burned through his money, left his name tied to debts and failed contracts. His reputation's ruined. No one in the industry will touch him. I sat there staring at my untouched drink. The words should have made me feel triumphant, vindicated even, but instead I felt nothing, just a strange emptiness. The man who once looked me in the eye and said I was his plan B was now broke, humiliated, and alone. Karma had found him, and it hadn't been gentle. That's when the messages started. The first was from an unfamiliar number. "Hey, it's Oliver. How have you been?" I deleted it without replying. Then another, and another, each time from a different number, short, vague, desperate. When I blocked him, the emails came. "Diana, I know you must hate me, but I really need to talk to you. I made a mistake." I stopped reading after the first line. Then came the voicemails, calls from blocked numbers, his voice trembling, sometimes angry, sometimes pitiful. "Diana, please just pick up. I'm begging you. Eva destroyed me. I should have never left you. You were the best thing that ever happened to me." Some messages dripped with tears, others with venom. "I can't believe you won't even talk to me after everything we had. You're a coward. You've always been too afraid to fight for love." I listened once, then deleted them all. When I didn't respond, he tried through others. His mother called me one afternoon. Her voice was kind, apologetic. "Diana, sweetheart, Oliver's in a bad place. He says he's lost everything. Can't you just talk to him? He needs a friend." I closed my eyes, took a breath, and spoke as gently as I could. "I'm sorry he's struggling, but I'm not the person he needs. I've moved on. Please don't call me about this again." Then came mutual friends, each with the same rehearsed plea. "He's really going through it. You're such a good person, Diana. Can't you just help him out?" But my answer never changed. "I wish him well, but my life is with Samuel now." And the more silent I remained, the louder his rage became. His final message burned with the bitterness I once knew so well. "You're pathetic, Diana. You were never brave enough, never woman enough. You'll always be nothing but plan B." I stared at those words on my screen, and for the first time in years, I smiled. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I realized it no longer mattered. His cruelty had no power over me anymore. I thought that was the end. That silence had finally buried the past. But the past doesn't always stay buried. Sometimes it shows up at your front door. The night of our engagement party felt like the perfect chapter in a story I'd finally learned to write for myself. Our apartment glowed with soft lights strung across the ceiling. Friends filled the room with laughter, clinking glasses, the smell of homemade food drifting through the air. I stood near the balcony, Samuel's hand warm against mine. He looked at me in that quiet way he always did, as if I were the center of every room we walked into. For the first time in years, I felt truly at home in myself, in us, in the family we were building. And then the doorbell rang. Claire went to answer it, and the room hushed. A ripple of silence fell as eyes turned toward the door. Oliver stood there, or rather the ghost of him. His once polished hair was messy, his suit wrinkled, his face drawn and hollow. The confident man who had dismissed me as his plan B was gone, replaced by a shell clinging to scraps of pride. "Diana," he said, stepping inside without waiting. His voice was rough, shaky. "I need to talk to you, alone." The weight of the room pressed down, dozens of eyes darting between us. Samuel's hand tightened around mine, grounding me. "There's nothing for us to talk about," I said, my voice steady. "And this is my home. You're not invited." He flinched just slightly. Then his eyes softened, pleading. "Please, Diana, Ava ruined me. I lost everything. I made a mistake. You were the one who believed in me, who stood by me. I know you hate me, but I swear I can fix this. We can fix us." The irony almost made me laugh. He had shattered me once, and now seeing the happiness he abandoned, he thought he could simply reach out and claim it again. I looked at him at the desperation in his eyes, and for the first time I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just clarity. "I'm not the woman you left," I said calmly. "And you were right about one thing that night. You should never settle for a plan B." His eyes flickered, searching for something to hold on to. I squeezed Samuel's hand, turned toward him, and felt the words rise with certainty. "I found my plan A, and I'm not giving him up for anything." The silence that followed was sharp, final. Oliver's face crumpled. As the truth sank in, he was irrelevant. Not just to my future, but to my present, my peace, my very sense of self. "I need you to leave Oliver," I said softly but firmly. "This is my family now. You have no place in it." For a long moment, he stood frozen. Then, with a defeated slump of his shoulders, he turned and walked out the door. The life he had lost, the one he thought he could crawl back to, faded with every step he took away from me. Samuel pressed a kiss to my forehead. The room slowly filled again with laughter, voices, warmth. The shadows of the past had finally left my doorstep. And as I looked around at the people who truly loved me, I realized something. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or grand gestures. Peace is quiet. And tonight my peace was unbroken. My name is Isabella Cannon, but everyone calls me Isa. I'm 27 years old, and until about 6 months ago, I thought I had life figured out. I had my boyfriend Matthew. I had my best friend since middle school, Lena. Together, the three of us felt unshakable, like a little chosen family. Matthew was steady, warm eyes, a voice that could ground me when the world felt too loud. Lena was the opposite, bright, bold, reckless, the type of woman who could walk into a room and bend it toward her. And me, I was the quiet one, the one who liked evenings in small groups, meaningful talks. Somehow with them, the balance just worked, or at least I thought it did. We spent weekends piled on my couch watching movies until we drifted asleep. Lena would tease Matthew about his predictable taste in films, and he'd fire back that she was secretly sentimental, always crying at the sad parts. I'd sit between them laughing, feeling grateful. At dinners, Lena's wild stories filled the silence. Matthew and I would exchange looks, the kind that said, "She's impossible, but we love her anyway." I remember one night in particular after a friend's wedding. We were drunk, messy, sprawled across my tiny living room. Matthew was singing along badly to some old song Lena was twirling in my kitchen with a wine glass, and I just sat there, my chest full. This is it, I thought. This is my family. But the thing about families, even chosen ones, is that they can rot from the inside without you noticing. At first, it was little things. Lena's digs at me. "God, Isa, you take forever to decide." Matthew, "Don't you wish she'd just pick a movie instead of scrolling for hours?" She'd laugh as if it were harmless, and Matthew would smile awkwardly, not defending me, but not stopping her either. Or Lena, buying Matthew a drink when I was in the bathroom. I'd come back to find him holding a glass of whiskey, and Lena would wink. "Don't worry, Isa, I've got your man covered." I'd laugh it off because Lena was Lena, flirtatious, playful, and Matthew was mine. Right? Then Matthew began echoing her, phrases I'd never heard from him before. "Why can't you just be more decisive, Isa?" Or Lena says, "You've got to live a little." She's right, you know, always. Lena says, Lena says, Lena says. At first I shrugged it off. Best friends rub off on each other. But there were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, a knot forming in my stomach. Was I losing them both without even realizing it? One evening, I gathered my courage and spoke to Lena at the gym where she spent most of her evenings. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual. Could you maybe ease up on the comments around Matthew? It's starting to feel weird. She froze dumbbell in hand and gave me a smile too sharp to be friendly. Weird, she repeated, almost laughing. Issa, relax. You're paranoid. If you're so insecure, that's your issue, not mine. The way she said it sliced right through me. My best friend, my sister, and everything but blood wasn't even pretending to care. I left the gym that night with a chill crawling up my spine. Still, I told myself I was imagining things, that Matthew loved me, that Lena was just being Lena. But deep down in the pit of my stomach, a truth whispered, she doesn't want to stand beside you, Issa. She wants to stand in your place. I ignored it. I pushed it down. And that silence, the silence of ignoring your instincts, was the beginning of everything unraveling. The cracks widened faster than I could patch them. Matthew began quoting Lena more often, like her voice had slipped inside his. I told myself it was harmless, but every time he said Lena says, something in me bristled. It wasn't jealousy, it was displacement, like I was slowly being written out of my own story. Then came David's birthday party. Loud music, flashing lights, bodies pressed together in a crowded club. Places like that drained me. But Lena thrived in them, and Matthew wanted to celebrate. I tried to stick it out, but by midnight a migraine pounded behind my eyes. I leaned in, whispering to Matthew, I'm going to head out. Will you come with me? He glanced at Lena across the dance floor and shook his head with a soft smile. You go ahead, Issa. I'll make sure Lena gets home. Something about the way he said it, like I was already an afterthought. But I nodded, kissed him goodnight, and left. My last glimpse was of Lena grabbing his arm, tugging him back into the lights. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I sat up, groggy headache still lingering. Notifications piled up, texts, DMs, group chats. Every message linked the same thing, a video from the party. My thumb hovered before pressing play, and then the world tilted. On the screen, in grainy neon light, Lena's back was pressed against Matthew's chest. His hands gripped her waist, pulling her closer. She tilted her head back, laughing into his ear as her body moved with his. It wasn't playful, wasn't innocent. It was hunger brazen and intimate. The music in the video roared, but all I could hear was the deafening thud of my own heartbeat. I replayed it once, twice, a dozen times. Each loop carved deeper into me. The girl in that video wasn't my best friend anymore. The man wasn't my boyfriend. They were strangers. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. A strange cold calm took over, as if my body knew that if I broke now, I would never stop breaking. I showered, dressed, drove to Matthew's apartment, our apartment. My hands were steady on the wheel, though my chest felt hollowed out. He was on the couch in sweatpants, scrolling through his phone. When I walked in, he smiled absently. Hey, Issa. I didn't answer. I held up my phone. The video froze mid-frame, Lena's head tipped back. Matthew's hand digging into her hip. His face drained of color. Issa, it's not— Don't! My voice came out flat foreign to me. It was just dancing, he insisted, sitting up straighter. God, Issa, don't be so dramatic. You left early. You don't understand. Not another word. For a moment, silence stretched between us. He looked at me like he expected me to yell, to cry, to beg. Instead, I walked into the bedroom, pulled out my duffel bag, and began packing. Jeans, shirts, toothbrush, passport, the essentials. Not the frame photos, not the trinkets we collected together, those belonged to another life. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, confusion twisting into fear. That's it. You're just leaving. I zipped the bag, slung it over my shoulder, paused long enough to meet his eyes. Congratulations, I said softly. You're free from all the boredom. His mouth opened, then closed. He didn't follow me as I walked past. I didn't slam the door, didn't look back. When I slid into my car, the weight of silence pressed down, but for the first time in months, it was mine. As I drove away, one thought burned steady. Lena hadn't just stolen Matthew. She'd stolen the illusion I'd built around both of them. And maybe she always wanted to. The motel room smelled faintly of bleach and old smoke. A humming air conditioner rattled in the corner, the only sound filling the silence I had carved for myself. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I expected tears, the kind that come in heaving waves. But there was nothing. Just a hollow space inside my chest, as though someone had scooped me out and left the shell behind. I spent the first night staring at the ceiling, replaying the video over and over in my head, not because I missed Matthew or Lena, but because I couldn't understand how I had missed it. How had I let myself trust so blindly? The next morning I acted. Small, deliberate actions, because control was the only thing I had left. I pulled my phone onto the scratchy motel bedspread and opened Matthew's contact. Block. Lena's too. Block. Then Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. Gone. No vague sad posts, no cryptic quotes, just erasure. They vanished from my digital world as if they'd never existed. When the buzzing started, texts from mutual friends, curious and nosy, I kept my replies short. Yeah, I'm fine. They chose each other. I chose peace. Then I'd change the subject. Hey, you watching the game tonight? Some friends pressed wanting the details. Those ones faded from my life too. The ones who stayed understood silence was my only boundary. Days blurred. I cleaned my car until it gleamed, reorganized my toolbox, signed up for an online certification course I'd put off for years. The gym became my anchor. Where before I went 3 times a week now, I went every day. I liked the discipline, the pain I could control. Muscles burned, sweat poured. But unlike betrayal, this pain built me instead of breaking me. One evening, wiping sweat from my brow, I remembered something that now felt like a warning I had ignored. Junior year of college. Lena and I had worked together on a project for a marketing class. I spent nights drafting slides, refining strategy. When it came time to present, Lena took the lead, my notes in her hand, my words on her lips. She dazzled the room, claimed credit with a grin, and I stood silently beside her, convincing myself it was fine. She was my best friend. We were a team. But standing in that motel room months later, the memory soured. It wasn't fine. It had never been fine. Lena had been rehearsing for this role her whole life, stealing pieces of me until she could step fully into my place. And Matthew, he had been too blind or too willing to notice. I sat on the edge of the motel bed that night, the hum of the air conditioner in my ears, and whispered to myself, they didn't break me. They broke the version of me that needed them. The strings were cut, and for the first time I was learning to move without them. Weeks passed. Silence became my companion. I worked, studied, lifted, slept. Life settled into a rhythm that was sharp, clean, and mine. But silence has a way of cracking when people insist on filling it. It started with Dave, one of the few friends who hadn't chosen sides. One afternoon, he sent me a screenshot from Lena's Instagram story. A quote in bold letters. Loyalty is rare. Don't test me. I stared at it for a long moment before replying simply, noted. He messaged back, weird vibe, huh? I didn't answer. Weird didn't cover it. It was a mask slipping. A week later, another update came. Ran into them at the bar, Dave wrote. She wouldn't let Matthew speak. Cut him off every time he opened his mouth. Honestly. She looked scary. I could almost see it, Lena's hand clamped on his arm, her voice sharp, her smile brittle. It didn't surprise me. Lena had always needed control. Matthew just hadn't realized until now that when she got it, she never let go. The irony was heavy, almost laughable. He had traded my quiet steadiness for her chaos, and now he was drowning in it. But I didn't laugh. I didn't even smile. Instead, I felt a strange distance, like I was watching a play from the back row. Their lives continued on stage. I had already left the theater. Still pieces of their downfall slipped through the cracks. Stacy, once Lena's closest confidant, called me late at night, her voice hushed. Isa, have you talked to Matthew lately? No, I said flatly. You should know. Lana's changed. She made him delete all his female friends from social media, even me. She checks his phone constantly. At Sarah's party, she screamed at him for talking to a coworker. He looked small. I've never seen him like that. I stayed quiet. The pause stretched so long I could hear her shift uncomfortably on the line. Isa, it's bad, she pressed. He's miserable. I don't think he knows how to get out. Finally, I spoke. He made his choice, and I made mine. But don't you feel anything, pity, anger? No. My tone was calm, almost detached. It's not my business anymore. She sighed in frustration. I thought you'd want to know. I thanked her politely before hanging up. My heart rate hadn't even changed. But when I lay down that night, staring at the ceiling, a thought whispered through me like a draft. Lena never wanted Matthew. Not really. She wanted me gone. She wanted to win. And winning for her didn't mean happiness. It meant possession. The cracks in their perfect mask were spreading. Soon it wouldn't just crumble, it would shatter. And for the first time, I wondered if they might try to drag me back into the wreckage when it did. It began with a text from an unknown number. Isa, it's me. Please don't block this. I'm sorry. I need to talk. I stared at it for a long time before deleting it. My thumb didn't tremble. My pulse didn't quicken. Just delete. Gone. 2 days later, another. I made a mistake. You were the best thing I ever had. Please, Issa. Just one conversation. Delete, block, silence. But desperation is persistent. The messages came faster, sometimes late at night, sometimes first thing in the morning. All from different numbers, each one chipping away at the bravado he had once worn so proudly. Then one evening my phone rang. Unknown caller. Normally I'd ignore it, but something in me pressed accept. Hello, my voice was calm. On the other end, ragged breathing. Then a broken sob. Issa. Oh God. Thank you for picking up. It was Matthew. His words tumbled over themselves, choked with panic. She threw a lamp at the wall. Said I was lying, said I was cheating. I swear I wasn't. She checks my phone every hour, Issa. She won't let me leave the apartment without her. Please. I just need a place to go. Just for tonight. Please. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall. His terror was real. I could hear it in the crack of his voice. But all I felt was stillness. No, I said simply. Silence. Then a shaky laugh, disbelief, dripping from it. What Issa? She's dangerous. She's not who I thought. You chose her, I cut in my voice flat. You chose fire over peace. Don't call me now because you're burned. His voice sharpened with anger, desperation curdling into rage. You're cruel, heartless. I thought you were different. You're just bitter because she was better than you. I pulled the phone slightly away from my ear until his shouting dwindled into static. When I pressed it back, I answered evenly. You're right. She is better at showing you exactly who you are, and now you both deserve each other. He sucked in a breath, a sound between a sob and a growl. You're cold. Goodbye, Matthew. I ended the call. For a moment, I sat in silence, staring at the dark screen. Then, without hesitation, I blocked the number. The room was still, my heartbeat steady. No tears, no trembling, just peace. For months, I had feared this moment, imagined what I'd say if he ever begged for me back. I thought anger would flood me, or pity would soften me. But instead there was nothing, a hollow kind of freedom. The last thread had snapped, and I realized with startling clarity that my story wasn't tied to theirs anymore. It was mine, entirely mine. Months drifted by, carried on the steady rhythm of a life that finally belonged to me. I didn't hear from Matthew again, not directly, but whispers floated my way. Screenshots. Stories. Their perfect facade had shattered completely. Friends told me Lena had started policing his every move, that she humiliated him in public, accused him of cheating if he so much as looked at another woman, that he stopped going out, stopped laughing, stopped being anything but her possession. Some called it karma. Some even asked if I felt vindicated. But I didn't. Karma implies satisfaction, a sense of winning. What I felt was quieter, emptier, like watching storm clouds roll over a town you no longer lived in. I didn't need to win. I only needed peace. And peace was loud in its own way. It echoed in the silence of my apartment where no one belittled me for my choices. It rang in the clink of weights at the gym, in the sting of sore muscles I built for myself, not for anyone else. It lingered in the emails confirming new projects, certifications, doors I opened, because I finally stopped waiting for others to hold them for me. One night, months later, I took a long walk through the city. The streets glowed with warm lamplight, the air carrying the faint hum of traffic. I stopped at a quiet bridge and leaned against the railing, watching the water ripple beneath. Once I would have imagined Matthew standing beside me or Lena laughing behind me. Once I would have pictured the life I thought was perfect. But in that moment, alone under the streetlight, I felt something richer, something that no betrayal could take away. Freedom. I closed my eyes and let the night air fill my lungs. The chaos they lived in was no longer mine to carry. I whispered into the dark, not for them, but for myself. Peace was louder than their noise, and it was mine. Then I turned, walked away, and didn't look back.